And your position is that this is not good for Israel. It is not good for Israel that these flows exist. Tell us why not.
When did this change from 1948, America's attitude towards Israel?
And that is radically inconsistent with the interpretation that the U.S. is an ally of Israel.
A lot of American dialogue right now, before I get to your public discourse, is about how America is being dragged into Israeli wars, or how America is supporting Israel and Israel will be nothing without America. I think the narrative that needs to be shattered is Line for Peace.
Hello, everybody. This is Francisco Gil White. This is Management of Reality. And with me today is Isabella Hassan. You will find her on Instagram and also now on YouTube. And she is a Jewish activist, communicator, defending the state of Israel, the Jewish people, Western civilization, because anybody who's defending the Jewish people is defending Western civilization. So Isabella and I are going to be discussing various topics. We've already found an interesting controversy that we can talk about, and I'll be interested to see what else comes up. Isabella, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You are now in Montreal, and you will soon be doing aliyah. You will
Yes, God
be
willing,
you,
soon.
you will be joining your life to the state of Israel. You will come to the flourishing state of Israel to be one with the Jewish people in the land of the Jews. Doesn't that feel good?
Honestly, it's a dream. I chose to make Aliyah on Tu B'Av, which is on the holiday of it's a Jewish holiday, Tu B'Av, and that's the day of my grandfather's yard site, the day he passed away. And it was important for me to choose that day because my grandfather had 23 siblings, which is enormous, not for the same
No.
woman. Yes, and they all went to Israel, and my family quite literally missed the boat. And I always felt like I missed the boat, but also extremely tied to the land. So making Aliyah in this date was very special to me because I felt like I was correcting a historical injustice, not an
Hmm.
injustice that my grandfather did, because we have a beautiful life here. And thanks to my parents, I'm able to make Aliyah and their support. It would be nothing without them. But that day is very important to me. So now I'm happy to make that, God willing, my Aliyah date, my Aliyah anniversary.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's get started, Isabella. So we were talking about the. Let's talk first about the question of the aid that Israel gets from the U.S. Okay, so there's some monies that Israel gets from the U.S. and also some military equipment that Israel gets from the U.S. And your position is that this is not good for Israel. It is not good for Israel that these flows exist. Tell us why not.
It's yes, and it's deeper than that. And in order to understand this, we have to go back to the history of it. A lot of American dialogue right now, before I get to your topic, public discourse, is about how America is being dragged into Israeli wars, or how America is supporting Israel and Israel will be nothing without America. But that could not be further from the truth. America is allied with Israel because Israel is strong and not vice versa. And that's a very key difference. America is allied with Israel because Israel is strong, not the other way around. And how do we see this? When Israel was founded and rebirthed, America wasn't exactly the most pro Israel. It was the Soviet Union that recognized Israel de jure first. America recognized Israel de facto. And we see that the Truman administration, the recommendation from the State Department, said that they shouldn't ally with Israel because they would ruffle the feathers with their Arab allies, and also that they estimated Israel would not exist outside of 3 years. That was categorically false. Thank God we see. So we see that America is not just benevolent towards Israel from the start, which is a very huge misconception. When did this change from 1948, America's attitude towards Israel? It changed in 67. Why did it change? Because Israel proved to be a winner. Israel proved to be a regional superpower. And because Israel is a regional superpower, America said, okay, let's shuffle our allyship, let's think our policy, and let's start investing more in Israel. And we see that since 1967, Israel has not won a war decisively. We have not won a war decisively since 67. Why? A big factor that contributes to that is American pressure. I don't know why it's an American interest for Israel not to decisively win a war, but we can't ignore the fact that every time Israel wants to finish their enemy off or wants to finish a war, America is holding Israel back. And those strings attached are not beneficial for Israel. That's what I want to emphasize on. It's the strings attached that are not beneficial to Israel. And what are those strings? Those strings are aid, which is really a debt because it just goes back into American companies. It goes back into America's military companies and all that. It goes back to the U.S. So it's like giving Israel a credit card and saying you can only shop here. That's not aid for Israel. That's just a coupon to America.
It's a
And
coupon.
short term, yeah. So short term, it feels nice because when we're nervous and we need, some bunker bombers to defeat the IRGC, it's like, okay, we have our bestie over here that's, gonna help us. But long term, it's a very much a disaster because for Israel to be respected in the region, that's number one security to me. I want Israel to be respected by all of its surrounding countries because the Middle East is not like here in North America where I am in Montreal right now. Your enemies really need to respect you, and we see neighboring countries respected Israel when with the Hezbollah operation with the beepers. Everybody was in awe. So I want to see Israel be more independent, stronger. And I don't know if I answered your question, but like
Yeah,
let's
yeah, yeah.
broaden the
I want
interview.
I want to follow up. I want to follow up. So I want to make an observation. So you said that when the narrative of the alliance between the U.S. and Israel really took off, which is
Right.
with the the 6 Day War of 1967, as you pointed out, that's the pivot. In other words, you pointed out that when that narrative began of the supposed alliance, I'm going to question whether there is an alliance, but you're right. When the narrative began, that's when Israel stopped really winning wars. And the security situation of Israel has only gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. So we can trace the decline of Israeli security very clearly to the beginning of the supposed alliance with the United States. And I think that's a very powerful point. It's a very powerful observation, I agree with you, against the view that it is in Israel's interest to be preserving this relationship. So that there I agree with you. Where I would like to push back is on the definition of the relationship as alliance, because you yourself are pointing out facts that are in dramatic contradiction with that interpretation. So you were pointing out that the US steps in to ensure that Israel cannot win its wars. It is constantly restraining the state of Israel. And that is radically inconsistent with the interpretation that the US is an ally of Israel, number one. Number two, you
I
also
agree with
pointed
you.
out, okay, and you also pointed out that what has been created is a dependency. This coupon argument, I like the way you put it. What it means is that because Israel is given this coupon to spend it on the US military, it means that Israel has not developed those kinds of weapons in house, which of course it could. Israelis can do whatever they want.
Of course.
Israelis are the most amazing people in the world. So if they wanted
Yes.
to develop their own military hardware, of course they could, and
Of
of
course.
course it would be the best hardware in the world. So really, what happened? Because actually, if you go into the history of this, I forget the exact details, but years ago there was a program to develop independence for the Israeli military, and the U.S. insisted on the coupon system and sabotaged the policy to develop independence. And that, once again, does not it doesn't seem consistent with alliance, because what the coupon system does is it gives the U.S. control over Israeli foreign policy, which the U.S., as you pointed out, uses to make sure that Israel cannot win a war. So tell me after hearing what I said, do you still think we should describe this as an alliance?
I agree with what you're saying, 100 billion%. And I actually want to add to what you're saying. The language of alliance is not by accident. I think that's a
Hmm.
feature of how America has influence over Israel. So we see even the most pro-Israel people, like myself, will use the word alliance because that is the most public-facing word that makes sense. And why is this? Why is the PR aspect of this so important? Because if America would sell the coupon program the way we are labeling it, nobody would be down with the coupon program. But if they label it as the alliance and we emphasize all of our shared values, then that's a way better sell. And so you know what? You're right. Maybe we should maybe stop calling it an alliance. Usually I say relationship, now that I'm thinking about it. But I also don't want to diminish everything else too, because I'm talking specifically about like military. So diplomatically, I do appreciate the embassy being in Jerusalem. That's something, of
But
course.
why does that matter?
No, it doesn't. But I'm saying when it comes to alliance militarily is different than alliance
Right, but I mean,
diplomatically.
but the embassy being in Jerusalem may feel nice, but it doesn't affect the security balance. Everything else
No,
we've
you're
discussed
absolutely
does.
correct. So when we're talking about alliance, I would be comfortable using the word alliance. When it comes to diplomacy, I would not be comfortable using the word alliance probably when it comes to military. And
Okay,
I wanted to also add on to what you mentioned, but also I'm not, for me, like the words, I know it's that deep, but sometimes I'd rather get into the nitty gritty of it.
okay, but I
But
want to be clear on something. I want you to state clearly your position on one issue so that I understand what you're saying. Did I hear you say, did I hear you correctly that you said that on the dimension of diplomacy, on diplomacy, you do believe there is an alliance? Did you say that?
I'm saying precisely that when I'm talking about diplomacy, I am more comfortable using the word alliance. Why? Because in diplomatic relations, it's all about connections and alliances. An alliance is not like an allyship. It's not this foolproof best friend, complete loyalty. Alliances are alliances. They're strategic. They're you scratch my back, I scratch your back. That's the way I see it. And diplomatically speaking, um, I think that's helpful for Israel to have an ally with someone with us, not someone with a country that's on
Okay.
the UN Security Council who has a veto. I think that is undeniably helpful. So I also want to be very clear. I am not I am not anti-friends with America. I am
Right,
anti-dependence on America.
right.
And also I believe that having a strong relationship is important, but that comes from Israel being strong. So my focus is more about making Israel stronger. That's my what I would like to see. And
Okay.
to add on to what you were saying, you gave a really good example about how Israel could do these build this technology on their own. In 1980s, Israel had their Lavi fighter jets that would compete with the F-1 US fighter jets. But the US did not want to share their market share. So they heavily lobbied Israel to cancel it. Imagine Israel launched their Lavi fighter jet program. So when I hear things like that, I get very upset. You know, this is something that is upsetting. So, but I feel like we're moving towards a more independent Israel.
Okay. All right. I want to push back on something and see what your
Mhm.
reaction is. So you perceive that at least in the sphere of diplomacy, the U.S. does behave like an ally. But I really want to push back on
No,
that.
I want to push back on something before you say that,
Okay. Hmm.
because
Hmm.
alliance does not mean ally.
Okay.
So
But
like
I
it's not
I
behaves like an ally is different. So for example, Israel has alliances with Morocco.
mhm.
Israel has an alliance with Jordan.
Fine, fine,
You
fine,
see,
fine. But
it's like
my pushback is gonna be so strong that this nuance will not matter.
okay.
So my work is about I'm trying to utterly transform the way people perceive the relationship between the U.S. and Israel. So allow me to set this up.
Mhm.
What would you say is the most important diplomatic initiative of the U.S. towards Israel? The most important in the entire history of the relationship?
In the history of the relationship,
What's the most important diplomatic initiative?
I don't think the benefit is an initiative. I think it's just in general having a powerful friend on the
No, no,
Security
no, no, no.
Council.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My question is, which policy would you select as the most important policy in the sphere of diplomacy that the U.S. has directed towards Israel? What would that be?
So my opinion on this is not about one specific policy. It's more the fact that at the UN, having a country that is on the Security Council for, let's say, a veto for something, that is beneficial. So
Okay,
it's
okay.
more,
Let me.
and in general, it's more soft culture. It's
I
less
get it. I
directive.
get it. But I'm not succeeding at making you see what I need you to answer. So I'm going to answer my own question and see if you agree. So I
I
believe
know I have a
that
feeling
the
what you're gonna
wait, wait.
say.
I believe that the most important policy of the United States towards Israel has been the Oslo so-called peace process. Would you agree or disagree?
Important? I think that was a disaster.
No, no, no. When I say important, I am not qualifying whether it's positive or negative. I'm just saying it's the one with the largest consequences for Israel. So the most important diplomatic initiative of the United States towards Israel in the entire history of the relationship, the one with the greatest consequences for Israel, has been the Oslo so-called peace process. That's what I would commit to as a statement. Do you agree with that?
So you're saying essentially that because the largest diplomatic initiative that was for Israel by the US was a terrible initiative, then we shouldn't be calling ourselves allies with them or alliance with them because it was so disastrous for Israel.
That's where I was going. You jumped a step, but that's exactly where I was going.
So
What do
I
you
agree
think of that?
with you. So I agree with you on that topic 100%. I think we're coming from the same feeling. I just think that, and I agree with that point a billion percent. It's a point that I've made myself in the past. I just think that the way we go about shifting the relationship would be to do it in a way that doesn't isolate ourselves and that just making us stronger.
Okay,
You
but I
know,
think
because we can point out how bad America is diplomatically for Israel with all these examples, but then empirically speaking, my question to you is, how do we change that? By pointing it out, yes, to an Israeli public, but two, how do we do it effectively? My answer would be making Israel stronger, period. Well, I'm
okay,
curious to
but
know what your
I
answer would
think
be.
I do think that it's very important in order to move us to where you want to be. In order in order for the
We want
state
to
of
be
hmm?
where we want to be.
Yeah,
We're on
that's
the
right.
same team.
I
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. In order to move the state of Israel where you and I would like it to be,
Hmm.
I think uh, there is a like a revolution in the consciousness of Israelis that needs to happen first. And
Yes.
that revolution in the consciousness of Israelis, in my opinion, requires that they understand what the Oslo so-called peace process has really been, because they don't understand. Even those who believe it has been terrible, and that includes you, do not understand just how bad it has been, what it has truly been. So allow me to make two historical observations that are
Hmm.
unknown to most people, even today and even in Israel. The first one is that so first of all, what was introduced into the state of Israel, into the Jewish state, created to protect the Jewish people from extermination, what was introduced is an anti-Semitic terrorist organization, number one. Number two, this anti-Semitic terrorist organization was made the government of the Arab Muslims living in militarily strategic territory.
Of course.
Judea, Samaria, and Gaza are militarily strategic territory. Okay? So an anti-Semitic terrorist organization was brought to govern a gigantic population in militarily strategic territory of the Jewish state. Second point. Third point. This organization, PLO Fatah, what we now call the Palestinian Authority, but it's PLO Fatah.
Of course.
The controlling core of this organization, which is Fatah, Al Fatah,
Hmm.
um, that was created by Haj Amin al Husseini and his cronies of the Arab Higher Committee. And the
Yep.
Arab Higher Committee is an organization that was created explicitly to kill Jews. Okay, so the Arab Higher Committee was the group organizing pogroms against the Jews in the Yishuv when this was still the British Mandate Palestine.
Mandate.
Okay, and
Hmm.
and Husseini didn't stop at organizing massive terrorist attacks against the Jews here. In
Hmm.
1941, in 1940, he traveled to Iraq and he organized the destruction of the Jewish community in Baghdad. That's called the Farhud. And then Husseini, let me just say this so that everybody hears it. Haj Amin al Husseini, is the founding father of the Arab Palestinian movement. Okay. This guy traveled after the Farhud, he traveled to Berlin in late 1941, met with Hitler, who received him as if he were a head of state, and they agreed that that the Arab Palestinian movement and the German Nazi movement would work together to exterminate the Jews in British Mandate Palestine, which they couldn't do because the Nazis were stopped at El Alamein in Egypt. But that was what they agreed to. And Husseini's consolation prize, and it's amazing that people still don't know this. Husseini's consolation prize is that he remained in Nazi-controlled Europe for the rest of the war. He was made a top Nazi. He had his own bureaucracy, Bureau des Gros Mufti. He was very big in Nazi propaganda, inciting European Muslims to murder Jews. He organized entire SS divisions for Heinrich Himmler, made up of Bosnian Muslims and Albanian Muslims that participated in the Yugoslav chapter of the Holocaust. And the worst part is that he became best friends with Adolf Eichmann, and together they ran the entire death camp system that murdered the European Jewish population. I repeat, this is the founding father of the Arab Palestinian movement. Israelis still don't understand today that the Arab Palestinian movement collaborated with the German Nazi movement in the extermination of the European Jews. They still don't understand this.
Do you think it's a question of understanding?
Well, think about the structure. The United States.
I think they understand. They may not know the details. I think they understand very well.
Let me demonstrate that they don't. Let me demonstrate that they don't, because this is a logical argument, Isabella, and we need all Israelis, all Jews to understand it. If Israelis had been told in 1993, when the Oslo I was signed, if they had been told that what was going to be brought into militarily strategic territory of the Jewish state was an organization created by the exterminator of the European Jews, if they had been told that, Oslo would have never happened. It's impossible.
So
But they didn't tell them. They didn't tell them.
They should have. That should have probably been the branding against what was going on, for sure.
Obviously.
But here's what I have a hard time with, is that sometimes knowing and understanding doesn't translate to action. There's a disconnect between understanding and action. So, for example, a few years later, in 2005, there was a Gaza disengagement. And that was after all the intifadas. Mm-hmm. So, historically speaking, I think it's very clear that Israelis understand that the PLO pays Palestinians to murder Jews. Israelis know about the pay for sling. Israelis understand this. The Gaza disengagement was heart-wrenching for Israeli society on TV. Those images, whether you were left wing or right wing, was heart-wrenching. But I think the disconnect between understanding, like you mentioned, I think it lies between the narrative that's being sold. And I think the narrative that needs to be shattered is land for peace. I think after October 7th, more Israelis have understood that, and very clearly, we're not about giving up land for any reason. And I don't think we should give up land ever, because every inch of this land is incredibly important for our history and our identity. But to go back to what I was saying, the disconnect, I believe, is that a lot of Israelis think that, okay, well, if we just give them this and we are separated, then we'll be left alone. I think the disconnect needs to understand the mentality of who we're dealing with. And who we're dealing with is an enemy that uses American Western contracts, who deals as a strategic pause in war to get stronger and then get more land, or
okay, but let me ask you this.
I think that should be emphasized, because Israelis are ready for peace. They're desperate for peace. They want peace.
I get that. But let me ask you this question, Isabella. So do you really think what you just said is more scandalous than telling Israelis the thing that was brought into the Jewish state is an organization created by the exterminator, the top exterminator of the European Jews in the Shoah? You think what you just said is more scandalous?
So let's put things into perspective. I don't think it's really about scandal. I think Israelis are practically living the war day to day, and they are looking for the quickest, easy band-aid for peace solution. So, for example.
No. You're misunderstanding.
No, I understand what you're saying. You're saying it's so scandalous. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying it's so scandalous that the architect of the Holocaust is being brought into Israeli land, and that should be strong enough for Israelis to say, hell no. I get what you're saying. What I'm saying is we see that Sinwar, who was a terrorist, And then the architect also of October 7th was given free brain surgery by the state of Israel. So if
Yes, but that's
Israelis
before
are
October
ready,
7th.
yes, before, but he was in jail as a terrorist. So if
Right.
Israelis are ready to socially accept a terrorist getting free surgery, and that,
No, no,
I think
no.
there's a difference. Yes. But
I can't
listen,
accept this, Isabella. I can't. Sorry, sorry. So
but what
you
you
seem
trying,
to be
Islam,
saying
it's not, I don't want to disagree with you. I think we're
no, no,
aligned.
fine. We can
It's
disagree.
that
Why
I want
not?
to
It's
disagree,
fun.
but
It's
I
fun
know,
to disagree.
but let's disagree on something that we actually disagree on,
No, I do
because
think we disagree
this is very
because I think.
hypothetical.
Hold on,
I think if
hold on.
every single Israeli knew what you just said,
Mhm.
I'm not sure how big of a difference it would make today, because Oslo already happened. They're not going to just
No,
uproot everybody in the West
Oslo
Bank.
has not. Oslo is going on. PLO
Yes, but
Fatah.
the deal was signed. Right
So
now, there
what?
is the PLO
So what?
there. So
So
I'm
what?
not sure finding out this fact is going to make people have a revolution and kick out the PA. I
Ah,
don't know if that's
okay.
going to happen. But
So
but you could try. We can go on I-24. We can go on Arutz Sheva. We can go on Israeli, and we can tell
I
them
am doing
Shalom,
this.
guys, and we can
That's what
tell
I'm
them in
doing.
Hebrew, and we can see. I think it's worth a try. Why not? I think that
Okay.
would be great. I would like our
All
land
right. Well,
back.
I've been doing. This is what I do. So this is my claim. Okay, because you would like PLO Fatah to be kicked out of Israel. Yes.
I would like for Israel to have sovereignty over the parts of our land, because I think that's better for Israelis and for
Why
Palestinians,
don't
and
you
it's
answer my
safer.
question?
Because you try to put me in a box. I don't know why. Because my
No, no,
ideas are more
no.
nuanced.
You
No,
can
because
answer
I'm
whatever you
answering your
want.
question, but you're not. But you want to put me in a box, and like, so you can make another point. But I'm answering the question based
Okay.
on my
So then let
nuance.
me ask
You
it.
don't
Okay.
like my
Let me ask
answer,
it.
and I'm literally
All right.
answering your
No, no.
question. You don't like my answer, so you tell me to answer it again the way you like. I
All right.
guess your answers before you tell. How many times have I done this in the interview? I told you. You believe this, and I like. That's
All
yeah.
right. Peace. Peace, Isabella. All right. So let me ask it like this. So do you think it's so you want sovereignty over Judea, Samaria, and Gaza? Is that true? Israeli sovereignty over Judea, Samaria, and Gaza? That part I did get right?
Carry on.
No, no, I just want to know if you did say that. Did you say that?
But depends on the next point you're gonna make.
No, I'm asking what you just said. Did you say you wanted?
I'm
I
saying
want to make sure
clearly
I
that
heard you.
I believe that Israel should have sovereignty over the land,
Okay.
because it is better for Israelis and for Palestinians. That's
Okay,
why.
I'm not trying to put you on the hot seat. You're misunderstanding my intention. I'm
Okay,
trying to
good. No,
understand. I'm
I
trying
don't
to
think you are. I
Okay,
think
I'm trying to understand what you think. That's all. So my questions are intended to draw out your model of how you think this is going to happen. So if you want sovereignty over the land, then my question is, do you think it's possible for the state of Israel to have sovereignty over the land without expelling PLO Fatah? That would be my next question.
that it will not be in that order. I think right now that
Hmm.
Israeli society is having a bit of an identity crisis. Before October
Okay.
7th, we saw the judicial reforms. And I think a
Hmm.
lot needs to happen before we even open up that conversation. Because the way I see it is, instead of kicking out the PLO and the PA and Fatah, if we create a society where we don't need to have checkpoints, where
Okay.
it's a little bit like Jerusalem and Jaffa and Yafo, and we give our neighbors who are the opportunity to understand our culture, accept us, I would like for them to reject the
Okay.
PA.
I see. All right, so let's do a thought experiment then. I think this will be interesting. So, just to understand how you reason about this, let's say that instead of PLO Fatah in Judea and Samaria, you had Iran. What do you think
Well,
Israelis would say about that?
I'm thinking, so the way you think is not the way I think. I think more about social cohesion. So let's
Hmm.
say now in the West Bank, for example, there's already Hamas, and one could argue that's already Iran, the proxy of Iran. So one could argue there's already Iran in the West Bank, the IRGC in the West
Okay.
Bank. And we all know this. The Hamas is getting increasingly popular in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. So the way I think is, how can we make Hamas less popular? How can we make the PA less popular in a way that we're strong? And it's not like a fake kumbaya peace where it's concessions, where it's more of a peace through strength and a peace through trust that is built. A lot of what has informed my opinions shifted when I started actually going to Judea and Samaria. Because this is a tiny piece of land that a lot of people talk about all over the world in the West. But practically speaking, the locals, they know how to live amongst each other pretty well. Of course, there's some, violence that spurs up sometimes, and car burnings and village burnings, and there's tit for tat very often between Palestinians and Israelis. But for the most part, for example, I was on a farm. This is like actually farmland. Like this is also important to keep in mind. I was on a farm. I was sleeping in a farm with a chicken that woke me up. I never had that experience before. And when I was speaking to the owner of the farm, he was telling me, so there was another tribe over here, and this Arab tribe, they were fighting with that Arab tribe, and they tried to cross my land. So then we had to have some sort of agreement. So he sent out somebody to talk to the sheikh, and then where that point was where they meant to talk, that was the new border. It's an unsaid rule, but he didn't know that. So next time they had to speak, he sent his messenger very, very far out, so that now the new border would be delineated, so his farm would be bigger. So these kinds of cultural norms are more effective and more real than Oslo, something that's signed in Washington. It's what the locals are doing. So when I think about how we can make a difference, I think of that example where I woke up with a chicken literally in my face and what it actually looks like over there. These are people who have like farms, who actually know how to shepherd, who are shepherds. It's not we're not dealing with like this is they're living off the land. So do I want the PLO on my land? No, I don't want the PLO on my land. Do I want Iran on my land? No. I speak for, I think, all Israelis about that. The question for me is, how do we have a more socially cohesive society? Like another great example, remember with the sheikhs in Hebron, the peace plan? That was interesting, but they got eaten alive by their counterparts, that never followed through. So I want to give enough courage for Palestinian leaders, Arab leaders, to come inside with us, because I believe that Palestinian identity can only survive with its proximity and connection and friction to Zionists and to Israelis. If there was no Israelis and no Zionists, there wouldn't be a Palestinian identity in the way that we know it today.
Fascinating. Okay, so I think you made a very good point, and I have to concede it. You said, well, this is not a thought experiment. Hamas is supported by Iran. So in a sense, Iran is already in Judea and Samaria, and they're definitely in Gaza. And in spite of that, the Israeli public has not forced the Israeli government to kick them all out. So you're making a very, very good point. This is not really a thought experiment, given that Hamas is a proxy of Iran. They're already in. So this makes me think that the value of what I'm going to tell you is not really for getting Israelis to produce this pressure. The value is for them to understand what their own government is. And I think that's very important, because what I'm going to tell you is the following. Not only is PLO Fatah descended from the German Nazi final solution, not only that. The other thing that Israelis were not told when Oslo was signed is that PLO Fatah is the creator of the Iranian jihadi regime. PLO Fatah, Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas and their friends trained and armed Ayatollah Khomeini's guerrillas in training camps in Lebanon in the 1970s. And when the Islamic Revolution triumphed, I'm going to send you the documentation when the interview ends.
Yes, would love that.
Ayatollah Khomeini sent to gather Arafat, Abbas, and their buddies who came to Tehran to celebrate the revolution with Khomeini because they were intimate. And PLO Fatah helped Khomeini create the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which is the creator of Hezbollah. So they've always been intimate with Iran. But, and by the way, all of this that I just told you, that was reported on the front page of the New York Times in 1979 when Khomeini took power. Okay.
Oh, I thought Tuesday when the New York Times was a newspaper.
Excuse me?
I thought you were going to say back when the New York Times reported news. I thought that's where you were
Well,
going.
my point is no. My point is yes, but they were not.
Mhm.
They've always been liars. But my point is that it was common knowledge that PLO Fatah created the jihadi regime in Iran in 1979 when the revolution happened, and that's very interesting because nobody remembers this now, and nobody remembered it in 1993 when the Oslo Accords were signed. Because if they had remembered it, Israelis would have revolted. I mean, can you imagine the Knesset approving the Oslo Accords if everybody in Israel understands that what they're bringing into militarily strategic territory of Israel is the daddy of jihadi Iran, which was promising in to all the world that they were going to repeat the final solution in Israel? Obviously not. So what's interesting about this fact, which I'm going to send you the documentation in a second, and we're going to put it in the description so that people can go see it. What is profoundly important about this fact is that it reveals to Israelis and to the Jews of the world what the Israeli government is, because nobody in the Israeli government explained to the Israelis what was being brought into the Jewish state. They brought exterminators of Jews into the state created to protect the Jewish people from genocide. That's what the government of Israel did. And this is something that Israelis and Jews around the world need to digest. This is what happened.
I just think that this is 100% facts, but I wish that the facts would translate into action
It
because
must.
it must. And I just think that ultimately, when you're speaking empirically, like people on the ground, a lot of people understand. All Israelis understand that the PA is not good. We'll put it in very simple terms, not good. But you still have a segment of Israeli society that is ready to not fight for Judea and Samaria. They think that having soldiers there is exhausting our resources. I've heard that argument,
Yes.
and that's a
Yeah,
very
right.
frustrating argument because, on the contrary, people who are living there are most strategic places to live. That's protecting our borders, and we can't all live in the center.
Right.
So I think the first step is to get those people who I think we're draining our resources and our soldiers there.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what else to do. I think that Israelis are also very tired of the war because the Miluim is having a very, very heavy toll on Israeli society right now,
Yes.
the
Yes.
reservists. And we definitely need more enlistment. I think sorting out the Haredi draft will help with alleviating that burden. One of my good friends, he went back to Lebanon for 100 days just now, and then he was there again in the beginning of November. And this is like a businessman. Like if you can't keep spending 100 days every 4 months to go to war, and they tell you this like last minute. And there's people who are fathers of families, and like it makes Israelis at their point where, okay, maybe we just want whatever is for peace, and they want to believe that if we give up
Mm.
this part, we give up that part, even if they're anti-Semitic, at least we'll create a barrier here, and we'll
Mm.
and we'll have that. That's more what I've seen, and I think that the cure to that is also having a stronger identity. When you know
Okay.
that, yeah, when you know that this is important to who we are, you're not going to want to give it up for anything.
Well, this is what Moshe Feiglin is saying. Moshe
What is he
Feiglin
saying?
he's a very important Israeli politician competing for prime minister, and he says that the problems of Israel cannot be solved unless the Jews recover their identity. They have to recover their identity, their mission to save the world, to be the light unto the nations, to make the Torah shine for the entire human species.
Mhm.
And if the Jews don't do that, they cannot solve the problems of Israel or of the Jewish community. But if they do that, he says,
Mhm.
then that will be the first domino to save the entire West. This is his argument, and I think it's a really interesting argument. His book is Israel is just the beginning in English. In Hebrew, it's called Ha'adam Mechapes Zeut, man in search of identity. And
Interesting, the translation.
well, he chose not to translate exactly, but the Hebrew title tells you what I was saying. His whole argument is about to ground the Jewish people again in the ancestral identity, in the ancestral biblical identity, and the God-given mission to save the world. Now, I want to commend you on something that you said, because it's very interesting. So you were talking about this controversy over Judea and Samaria. Some people stubbornly saying, "Oh no, we shouldn't have soldiers there because it's very expensive and people are in danger, and let's just get out," and blah blah blah. But we saw this argument, didn't we, with Gaza? This is precisely the argument they made in Gaza. And people like me were shouting, "No, no, no, don't get out of Gaza. The cost is going to be so much bigger if you get out of Gaza." So I agree that there's a cost and that you lose some soldiers and it's expensive to be policing Gaza and all this stuff. I get that. But we said, myself and many other people said, if you get out, it's going to be so much worse. And we were right.
The argument has failed on a security standpoint, even if one doesn't agree with it on an ideological standpoint, which I think they should. Even if they don't agree with it on that point, on a security standpoint, after October 7th, it is undeniable. You know, that argument has been disproven in the saddest of ways.
Yeah, very true. Isabella, we have run out of time, but I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. I really enjoyed it.
I think we should do this again. And it's very useful for me because I'm an anthropologist. And yes, I spend a lot of time defending Israel, but I'm also interested in understanding better how Jews are thinking about the situation of the state of Israel. And this conversation has helped me a lot.
Me too. Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you. And I think that I think you are pointing out very important issues and defending them well. And I wish you the best with your Instagram and your YouTube accounts. And I hope that you grow very quickly and communicate with a lot of your brethren. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for what you do and for supporting Israel. We'll have to do this
again. Thank you, Isabella, and I hope to see you again. Everybody,
yes,
this is Management of Reality. Make sure you subscribe and share and what else? Like and ding the bell. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.